Hello, thanks very much for joining us for Talking Europe on France 24. I'm Catherine Nicholson. Now, as people all around the world adapt their lives to try and stay safe from the deadly threat of COVID-19, criminals the world over have been looking for and finding opportunities to profit from the health crisis. In our programme today, I'm speaking to one of the people working to combat that criminal activity, Catherine De Bolle, who's Executive Director of Europol, that's the European Law Enforcement Agency, which can get involved in investigations where an alleged crime affects two or more of Europol's member states. Catherine De Bolle, thank you very much for being with us from your headquarters there in The Hague.
Good morning. Thank you for having me in the studio.
Well, I'd like to start off with that issue of these new crimes or a new surge in crimes that have come up during the pandemic. What kinds of crimes have been particularly prevalent during the coronavirus pandemic?
So we see that the coronavirus pandemic is unprecedented and it has a huge impact on the internal security in the European Union. Since the beginning of the pandemic, we have been monitoring 24/7 all the crime areas, and we did see a change. We did see that criminal business didn't stop. We saw a huge impact since the beginning on cybercrime, and we are very much concerned about child sexual abuse online. We see an increase in counterfeit and substandard goods, and we have issues with property crime. These were very highly impacted.
Well, on child sex abuse, I know that you said recently that this was the most worrying aspect of the pandemic's effect on crime in Europe. Why is it that child sex abuse is increasing?
We see this through three main key indicators. First of all, we see that offenders are trying to get into illegal websites. Mm-hmm. We see that there is, since the pandemic, a huge increase. For instance, in the UK, Internet Watch, the Internet Watch organization, they did see a very huge increase. The second thing we have is that the hotlines are called much more than before, sometimes up to 4 times more, and it is also done by teenagers. Mm-hmm. We see a huge increase over there. And then at Europol level, we have a dark web team. They are monitoring the internet. And from the beginning of the pandemic, they saw that the offenders would take advantage of the fact that the children are at home, that they are not supervised all the time, and that they use material that is outdated or that is not effectively secured. And there were indications since the beginning that the offenders would make use of this situation. Now, when we have been monitoring the situation already a few months, we indeed see an increase of the child sexual exploitation material online. It is more used and it is more transferred between the offenders. And we also see that they actively are looking to have access to vulnerable children.
So what's being done to protect these children?
We have raised awareness among the law enforcement community. From the beginning, we informed the law enforcement community that we are confronted with it, and we developed prevention campaigns on our website, but also together with member states, translated in the different languages of the European Union, to give advice to parents and to give advice to adults how to protect their children on the internet. Because you have to be aware, when your child is under the age of 12, for instance, and it goes on the internet, the child has access to the world, but also the world has access to your child. So you have to be aware of it, and you have to protect your child in this situation.
Now, obviously, we've seen member states struggling really to cope with the immediate health crisis, their healthcare systems, trying to stop their economies from falling apart as well. Do you feel that European governments and law enforcement agencies are able to cope with this increase in coronavirus crime, as well as all of those other crises?
So the law enforcement community, the police forces in the member states, their first big concern was to be sure that the measures taken by government were respected. So they had to be aware of the fact that on public order issues, they had to be there. And secondly, all the member states, together with us, we did monitor the situation from a criminal perspective. And even during the crimes, we had big operations together with the member states regarding counterfeit goods, regarding the protection of healthcare in hospitals, for instance. When there was a cyber attack, together with member states, we managed to disrupt the attacks and towards the hospitals. We had child sexual abuse cases that we supported, for instance, in Italy, for instance, in Spain, together with member states. And we also see, for instance, related to drugs, that there were already more seizures in some countries during the pandemic than last year when we compare it with the figures of the same period.
Now, obviously, we think of the EU as one entity, but really it's one market with obviously separate nations, separate law enforcement, separate police. We have in the past seen, haven't we, issues with those police forces coordinating with each other. I'm thinking perhaps of 2015, holes in the cooperation between French and Belgian police around the time of the Bataclan attacks. Are those types of gaps in cooperation still there?
I think on the level of police cooperation at the European Union, we do well. It is the choice from the different member states and from the EU level that law enforcement and internal security in the states is a national competence. It's not a European competence. But Europol is here to be the criminal information hub for the different countries. This means that when we have cases related to serious and organized crime, to terrorism and to cybercrime, the information can be shared through Europol. Europol makes the analysis of the information, and together with different member states, we develop action plans how to see how will we tackle this fight. What we see now is that organized crime organizations are becoming stronger due to this pandemic, and they want to make more and more profit out of this pandemic. During this week, for instance, we had a meeting with all the police forces in the European Union discussing this threat and developing already together what are we going to do about it and to raise awareness about it, because we have to protect the public and the private finances of the people and of the Union.
Now, of course, while all of this is going on, there's a big political issue in Europe which could have an impact on security. I'm talking about Brexit. Recently, Ursula von der Leyen said that Britain needs to give legal guarantees about how it's going to handle sensitive data regarding European citizens if it wants to get access to close police cooperation. Not asking you to comment on the political side necessarily, but are you worried that close police cooperation between the UK and the EU could actually be lost or be degraded?
As you already mentioned, we are not the negotiator in the process. The political level is doing the negotiations about Brexit. We, as the European Law Enforcement Agency, we are prepared for each scenario. And I am confident that knowing the leading police officers in the UK and knowing the leading police officers in the EU, that we will find solutions to cooperate in the future.
So do you feel that there is a risk that organised criminals would be likely to exploit a break or, as I said, a degradation in EU-UK cooperation on policing?
Organised crime, as we saw it now due to pandemic, it has been like this in the past and it will even become stronger in the future. They will always look and look for the gaps in the system, and they will always try to get out the opportunities for them. There is one thing they want, and that is profit, and make abuse of a situation that is there.
Well, just looking back more generally to the future for Europe, as a result of the measures to contain the virus, European Union states are moving into what's expected to be the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression. To what extent do you believe that this is likely to increase crime?
We believe that the crime and the shifts in the crime areas we saw during the pandemic, it will not end when the pandemic will end. We are convinced that the criminal organizations will try to make profit out of the pandemic long after the pandemic. They will make use of the economic downturn. They will make use of economic sectors in difficulties like tourism, like HoReCa. What we see two big things is the change in financial behavior of the citizens. Citizens use more online transactions, so criminals will try to get your identity or your data out of it. And the second thing, the economic downturn, they will make use of it. Criminal organizations will look for vulnerable people to offer financial services that are not regulated. They will try to misuse public funding, because we will have big recovery plans on national and on European level, and the criminal organizations will try to invest their money in sectors that are vulnerable now. They will buy houses because through their real estate they will try to gain power.
All right,
so we are very concerned, and that is yes.
We'll finish on that warning for the future. Thank you very much, Catherine De Bolle, Director of Europol. I'm sure we'll come back to you at some later point to find out how your efforts to combat all of this crime are going on. And thanks to you as well for watching this edition of Talking Europe. I hope to see you soon for more European news on France 24.